Hey everybody, this is John, and it's time for another family history lesson. As you can tell by the number of relatives we have in our Facebook group page, we have a very large and extended family. I meet new cousins all the time, and the first question I get asked is, how are we related? Well, hopefully this video will answer that question. To answer this question is quite simple, but a little complicated to explain. Probably the best way for me to do this is to first talk about basic genealogy, and then second, talk about the Dacklin family history and how it relates to your own family history. Let's first talk about some basic genealogy, and let me use the whiteboard to help me explain. So when we start with genealogy, we always start with a individual. This could be me, you, or anybody. Now we know that every individual has two parents. We also know that each of those parents had two parents. Which are your four grandparents. And then we know that each one of your grandparents had two parents. Which means that you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 great-grandparents. And of course, each one of them also had two parents, which means that you had 16 great-great-grandparents. So as you can see, as you go back each generation, the number of grandparents or great-grandparents, everything doubles. And that's why it's called a family tree, because as you can see, the farther you go back, the wider it branches out. It basically looks like a Christmas tree. And each one of these family names is basically just an individual branch of your family tree. So let's erase this and look at how far back the Dacklin family goes. Okay, so we talked about how everybody's family history is like a tree. And the farther you go back, the wider it gets. And that each one of these family names is a branch of your tree. Well, one of those branches of your family history is the Dacklin family. And we've been able to trace back one of these Dacklin families all the way back to 1500 and the town of Dacklin. And we have a 17th great-grandfather by the name of Par Olsen. And Par Olsen lived in Sweden between 1500 and 1564. So since he's our 17th great-grandfather, that basically means he's 18 generations back from today. So remember when I talked about how every generation is doubled. So you have two parents, four grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. So every generation doubles going back. So if we know that Par Olsen is 18 generations back from today, how many 17th great-grandparents do you think that you have? Do you think you have, let's say, 1,000? No. You have more than 1,000 17th great-grandparents. How about 5,000? That's quite a bit, but no, you have more than that. How about, let's say, 50,000? 50,000 individual family names going back 18 generations. That's also incorrect. The number of 17th great-grandparents that you have, and it's a big number, is 262,144. That means that you have 262,144 family names that you are related to today, and you have 262,144 17th great-grandparents. So as you can see by this number, just going back 18 generations, your family history, your family tree is wide and vast. And each one of these names is just one branch of your family tree. So let's go back to today's time, and let me show you my branch so you can see how we are related. All right, so looking at my history, here's me. And my father was Albert Curry, and my mother was Ingrid Dacklin. On my father's side, his father was Martin Curry and Winifred Fish. And on my mother's side, her father was John Dacklin, and her mother was Anna Olawson. So there's just the beginning of my tree. And like I said, as you go back, you have all these different branches of different family names. So when we talk about the Dacklin family, or when I discuss the Dacklin family, I'm only talking about one side or one branch of my family. I've gone to Curry reunions, I know my Fish relatives, I also know relatives on my Olawson side. But the Dacklin family is just one branch. And why is that more important than any other family? It's not really. All these different families are important to you. It's just that the background history and the background story of the Dacklin is pretty fresh. I mean, most of the immigration on the Dacklin side came within the last 100 years. And the story about how they came over here and why they came over is quite interesting. And I think that's why there's this connection between the American relatives and our Swedish relatives. So let's take a look at that story to see how it all began. We'll begin our story with Jonas Dacklin, born 1847, and Ingrid Backwell, born 1849, a young married couple living on a farm called Dambacken, just a few miles west of Liden, Sweden. They were married in 1874, and over the next 14 years had 7 children, 6 girls and 1 boy. They were Sophia, Christina, Jonas, Louisa, Marta, Anna, and Paulina. In September 1888, when his youngest daughter Paulina was just 1 year old, Jonas died in a lumber accident. This created great hardship for the family. Life was hard on the farm with no financial income. Jonas's widowed wife Ingrid took on work as a midwife and many times left the young Dacklin children to manage the house and farm. In 1893, 5 years after their father's death, the second oldest child, Augusta Christina, age 16, immigrated to America with her mother's brother Paul Backwell and settled near Manistee, Michigan. In 1911, Louisa Dacklin followed her fiancé, Eric Holm, to Minnesota, where they were married and settled near Lake Candy, Ohio. And finally, in 1924, Jonas Dacklin also immigrated to America with his wife and 3 boys. Upon arriving at Ellis Island, he changed his first name from Jonas to John. The Dacklin family settled in Kasota, Minnesota. When you look at this list, you'll see that half the family, Augusta Christina, Louisa, and John, came to America, leaving behind their 4 sisters, Ingrid, Sophia, Marta, Anna, and Paulina. The 2 sides of the family, separated by the Atlantic Ocean, never saw each other again. 32 children were born to the 7 Dacklin siblings. Here's a look at the 7 Dacklin families. Ingrid Sophia married Eric Persson. Their children were Johan, Evelina, Emma, Anna, Ingrid, Kirsten, Ole, and Alan. Augusta Christina married John Schoberg. Their children were William, Lily, Walter, Anna, Bernita, Esther, and Linda. John Dacklin married Anna Olawson. Their children were Eric, Paul, John Tor, Ingrid Marion, and Reuben. Louisa married Eric Holm. They had 5 sons, Homer, John, Reuben, Carl, and Marty. Marta and Manfred Weeken married, and they had 1 son, Ole. Anna married Niels Winter. Their children were Reuben, Stina, Sten Story, and Lisa. And finally, Paulina Dacklin married Leonard Westland, and they had a daughter, Solveig. So here are the 7 first-generation family names, half of whom lived in Sweden. The children in each one of these families would be first cousins to the children in the other families. Also, here's a look at the second-generation family names, or great-grandchildren to Jonas Dacklin and Ingrid Backwell. The children in each one of these families would be second cousins to the children in the other families. You should recognize many of these names. Each one of you is a descendant of one of these families. Now, let's go back to the whiteboard and let me draw a Dacklin family tree based on the information I just presented. So here's the Dacklin family tree. You have 3 branches on this side and 4 branches on this side. The 3 branches on this side represent the 3 families that immigrated to America. And the 4 branches on this side represent the 4 families that stayed in Sweden. Each one of these branches represents one of the 7 families that were descendant of John Dacklin and Ingrid Backwell. So when you're trying to figure out how you're related to somebody, all you really need to know is what branch you're from in the family tree. Remember that each one of these branches breaks into smaller branches. For instance, like in the Schulbergs, they have smaller branches that break into like the Walters or the Jessicks or the Nelsons. And every one of these branches breaks into smaller families. So when you meet somebody from the family, all you really need to know is what branch do they come from within the family tree. Well, that concludes this video. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how you fit into the Dacklin family tree and how you're related to other members of the Dacklin family. If you're still confused, feel free to contact me and I'll answer any of your questions. That's it for now. See you soon.